I had a situation where I had a large complex, so I did have juice with respect to the lenders because they did want to lend there. And we had to get a U.S. congressman involved and it was a mistake. They were on the list for an incorrect reason. And it was so difficult to communicate with them that we literally had to engage a congressman who set up a meeting with Fannie Mae representatives. And I went from never hearing from anybody to I had about 20 people on the Zoom meeting with me.
This is the Co-op and Condo Insider, the podcast dedicated to New York's cooperative and condominium communities. This is your trusted source for the latest insights, strategies, and stories shaping the world of shared housing. You will hear from the people who are leaders in this community, information and insights you will not hear anywhere else. If you want to stay ahead of the curve, you're in the right place. The views and opinions expressed on this program do not necessarily reflect those of the host or any affiliated individuals or organizations.
Hello, and welcome to the Co-op and Condo Insider, where we explore the real-world issues facing co-op and condo communities across New York City with insight, expertise, and a healthy dose of straight talk. I'm your host, Jeffrey Maisel, co-op attorney and legal advisor to the President's Co-op and Condo Council. I'm thrilled to be joined by my co-host, Richard Solomon, a seasoned voice in public radio for over 20 years. Richard has taken his listeners around the world to meet experts, newsmakers, and the people making a real difference in our everyday lives. Richard, great to have you on the mic today.
Love being here.
And we have a very special guest today. And we go around the world. Sometimes we even go to Massachusetts. And we have Stephen Marcus. Stephen, welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having me on.
My pleasure. So Stephen is a condominium attorney and homeowner association attorney in the law firm of Alcock and Marcus. And you are located, where are you in Massachusetts?
We're in the town of Braintree, Massachusetts.
Is that a suburb of Boston or?
We're used to be part of Quincy, and so it's where like John Quincy Adams lived. It was about 7-8 miles outside of the south of the city.
Okay, there you go. So it's the Boston area. And explain to us the nature of your firm and your client base.
So we practice mainly condominium law in the New England states. We do a little bit of work in Florida, and we typically represent condominium associations, lenders, some developers, in creating condominium associations and advising existing condominium associations from everything from rules and regulations to amendments, etc.
So I guess we're going to be talking about Fannie Mae today. So the first question is, could you demystify for all of us what Fannie Mae does and what do they actually do with respect to co-ops, condos, lending, mortgages? Because it has to be sort of explained to the average person because nobody really understands what they do.
Okay, so Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac are government-sponsored entities. So they were created by Congress, but are supposed to run independent of the government. And basically what they do is they buy loans from local lenders so that more money is infused back to the local lending community to lend out, so that whether it be single family homes or condominiums or homeowner associations, that there's money available for people in home ownership. So they infuse monies that give lenders the abilities to lend more money, and the theory and the idea make perfect sense. Now, I say that they are supposed to be separate from government, but in 2008, under the Housing Economic Reform Act, Fannie and Freddie were put into conservatorship with the Federal Housing Finance Agency, FHFA.
What's the difference between Fannie Mae versus Freddie Mac? Like, what's the functional difference?
Two separate and distinct entities that do the same thing. They both buy loans from the local lenders. It infuses billions back into the lending communities, and they essentially are competitors.
How did your firm become involved in issues surrounding Fannie Mae and condominium lending?
So we started hearing about this blacklist, or what was called the ineligible list. So after the Surfside building and
How did you become aware of that? Like, how did that come about? Did someone like, were you hearing it from your clients, from lenders, from brokers?
after the Surfside building went down, we were hearing it from condominium associations that were not eligible for loans, and then we had not heard of that before, though there had always been an ineligible list, but there were only a few hundred condominium associations, I think, on it in the early stages. Post-Surfside, the numbers started skyrocketing, and is presently currently about 5,500 community condominium associations throughout the country that are on the list. Those a few hundred post-Surfside, it exploded, and all of a sudden people are getting denied. And it was, well, how do you get this list? How do you find out if you're on this list? And there were no answers.
So just walk it back a little bit. Surfside, for those of you who don't know, is explain, what was that, about what was it, about 7 years ago, sir?
June 24th, 2021.
Oh, so
The Surfside, Champlain Towers South condominium tragically collapsed, tragically killing 98 people. The collapse itself and the 1.2 billion with a B settlement got to the attention of the world and certainly of the lending community and Fannie and Freddie Mac. And it's our associations that we have give loans to borrowers to. Are they in a state of disrepair? That something similar is going to happen.
so basically one building collapses and 5 to 6 thousand condominiums are punished, essentially, or blacklisted.
That's a perfect way of putting it. And from the eyes of, keep in mind, Fannie and Freddie are actually for sort of bureaucracies were always very, very easy to deal with. Going back to around 1979, 1980, when they became big players, from Bob Cooper to Bob Foster to Dwayne Cooper to others. They were pretty easy to deal with, get waivers from, and all that. FHFA taking over under the conservatorship, we saw a change in the personality of Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, that all of a sudden they were much tougher. And I think that was because they were taking their orders from FHFA, which was risk adverse, whereas Fannie and Freddie wanted to lend to the local communities so people could buy homes, etc.
So,
And things tightened up after
so-
the Surfside collapse.
yeah, so that timeline makes sense because I've been practicing all that time, and I I don't remember this ever being an issue till
It never
the
was.
recent past. Yeah, yeah. So basically, if I'm getting this correct, Fannie Mae was fairly user-friendly and productive, I'll call it, in advancing loans to the condominium associate to condominium sales. Up the conservatorship was a result of 2008, you said? Was that
Yes.
the housing bubble of 2008? Is that
Yeah, and the interesting thing is FDIC, with the much more severe issue in the early 90s, was around for about 4 years. The FHFA conservatorship has gone since 2008, with some talk now about maybe loosening the reins, but those conversations will take a long time in coming. And Fannie and Freddie are actually turning huge profits at this point.
so?
So we're
So how does it? come out of conservatorship, and who makes that application? Is there,
Congress.
and has it come to I guess there would be a vote. Has there been a
Uh,
bill proposed or a vote or any discussion?
there are all sorts of discussions that, so there's a new director of FHFA, Bill Pulte, and he's a relative of the Pulte Holmes family. So knows housing, knows the importance of housing and all that. And there are discussions by the president as to whether Fannie and Freddie should come out of the conservatorship or whether there should continue to be government controls. There's some discussions about should Fannie and Freddie Mac become one entity, which has been met with disfavor by the lending community, opposes the idea of one entity. So discussions have occurred, but they're fairly recent.
So is your firm involved in any advocacy on these issues, or you just follow it
So,
closely?
we're following that closely. See, we're heavily involved with CAI, which has much less of a presence in New York City, but on a national level has been very involved with a seat at the table with Fannie and Freddie and this ineligible list, the blacklist, and discussions, which predominantly have been about insurance, getting rejected because of insurance and getting rejected because of critical repairs
So
by Fannie and
CAI
Freddie.
is, what is that? It's condominium,
Community Associations Institute.
and
So it's
that's a national organization.
it's a national organization involves Church, Virginia, I believe, with local chapters that has a small concentration of membership in New York City, but outside of New York is fairly active with issues that include co-ops, but much more condominiums and homeowner associations, I would say.
Well, when we get offline, and I don't want to spend a lot of time, we will discuss unifying our efforts because we do have a strong number and a large number of co-ops that are adversely affected, and probably similar issues as the condominium associations with Fannie Mae. So we could maybe increase the voice of this organization or lobby, so to speak.
Okay. Did you ever deal with Doug Klein?
Uh, no, no,
Oh,
no.
okay. He was with the National Association of Housing Cooperatives.
Yeah. Oh, yes. Actually, I've worked with them when we were advocating for the Paycheck Protection Program to include co-ops in New York during the pandemic, and thankfully, the minority leader at the New York of the U.S. Senate at the time was and is Chuck Schumer, and he lives in a co-op. So we had a friendly advocate there, and it worked out well for all of us. Okay, so we have 2008. We have the everlasting receivership of Fannie Mae, and then we have one building collapse. What happens from the collapse of the building to the creation of the blacklist? How did this manifest itself?
Well,
You know,
okay, so the list existed, but there weren't more than at tops maybe 500 associations that were on the list prior to the Surfside collapse. So nobody really paid attention or knew about or did anything about the list, or maybe it was only a few hundred associations. After the Surfside, about a year after, uh, the Fannie Mae tightened up its requirements on critical repairs and on insurance requirements, etc. But a predominant uh, focus on critical repairs, structural inspections, and the like, and more and more buildings were being looked at with a much sharper eye because of the changes, and there was even an addendum to the lender questionnaire that associations are supposed to fill out, or the manager is, or the lender is, and with very tough questions on are there any structural inspections? Are there any reserve studies? Are there any conditions that would affect the soundness and safety of the buildings? And more associations were uh, caught in the so a building goes down. Other associations across the country get nervous, probably especially in Florida, but all over the country. They start doing structural inspections. They do an inspection that shows a few $1 million of repairs, and which is a great thing, I would think. Except now you say, okay, we have a report says that we have to do $3 million of repairs, and Fannie Mae says, well, until you've completed all $3 million worth, you're not eligible for loans from us.
So
But this,
I'm assuming at Surfside they didn't do these reviews, engineering reviews, and
It,
and
it wasn't until after Surfside collapsed that the structural inspections became, and the questions that Fannie Mae were asking became much more direct in terms of they wanted lenders looking at the structural soundness of the building, any structural repairs, roofs, facades, mechanical system, and the structures. And if you had any of those issues and hadn't corrected them, then it would make you ineligible until you fix them.
so from a tort perspective, you're discouraging repair and maintenance, which only is against public policy. How do you navigate that with Fannie Mae?
One would think that, yeah, you hear about the Surfside collapse and you want to do a structural inspection, and it's, well, if we do an inspection, then and it's not good, then nobody's going to be able to. Fannie and Freddie buy these days like 50% of all loans for single family homes and condominiums in the United States. It used to be up to like 70%. FHA buys about 5% of them. So all of a sudden, 55% of the market for loans has been closed out because Fannie Mae won't buy the loans. So it's an excellent question, Richard, in terms of what do you do? And obviously, as an attorney, I'd probably have to say, well, you have to do the inspections, but the associations and the managers, they really don't want the reports because if the reports are adverse, then the association could become unmarketable.
Yeah.
yeah, they also and we have this also in New York with co-ops. They become liabilities in your financial statements. And Richard, I guess I understand your point is thinking, that's how attorneys think, and it's all good and correct. But we're talking about a market, and I once read an article about getting full body scans, and then does it help you if you know you get what you're going to die from, or you may die from in 20 years, or you may not. It finds everything wrong with you, but there's the balance between having a functioning building versus putting your building into bankruptcy for contingencies that may or may not happen. And when you have, at least in my experience, when you have engineers look at buildings, they're going to tell you everything wrong, because if they miss something, they have
Yeah.
liability.
And radiologists are the same.
Right, exactly. Right.
So a radiologist does a full body scan. More likely than not, the three of us are probably going to have, and everybody else in the world is probably going to have something that's going to be seen, and maybe it's been there since we were born,
Yeah.
and it's never going to be an issue, and we'll die of old age like everybody else. But once you see it, you have to address it. So you
Right. So
do.
I'll give you another lawyer's answer, Richard. It's a balancing question. And right now the scales are pressed against, don't lend, the exposure is tremendous. Stephen, are you familiar with the condominium market now in Florida? Because I've heard
Yes,
it's a disaster.
yeah,
Explain it. It's a disaster, correct?
it's a disaster.
So can you explain what's going on? Because that could happen here in New York too.
So, so almost like um, Surfside was a geographical event.
What
The
does that
first
mean?
state that the first state to react to the collapse wasn't. It should have been every condominium in the country, if not the world.
Right.
Instead, the first state to react was almost like it was contagious. Was Florida. So it's well, as of January 1st, 2025, all buildings were supposed to have reserve studies that included a structural inspection, put aside money for those repairs, and DeSantis in 2025 actually fought for legislation that cut back the timetable so it didn't have to be done by January 1st, 2025, since half the condominiums had not done the inspections, and gave them a little more time to fund and things of that nature. So maybe the first response from the legislature in Florida was a slight overreaction. It was a real problem, but most associations weren't in a position to comply in time, and um, I guess condominium buyers are made up of the newlywed and the nearly dead. And on the nearly dead part, the saying is that we have to have fully funded reserves. The answer is fully funded reserves. I hardly buy green bananas. Uh,
So,
Nobody
so,
would.
so if you could give a number like the average assessment that you're looking at or increase in common charges, is there a number you could throw out there or just that?
I'm not sure I have one, but we're seeing assessments that are staggering. We're seeing six figures per unit owner assessments in some cases, where I've heard numbers of a 40% decline in sales and lowered prices, et cetera, with condominium associations. And certainly, if you're in a high-rise condominium, and you're on the water, the reaction may be more severe. But and there are people who can afford those. But Surfside was a building that was built in 1980. And some of the problems, because NIST is the government has been appointed by the government to do the investigation, and the first part of the investigation indicated a problem with the pool deck on the first floor that may have been the start of the collapse. But the issue with the inspections is that the boards had kicked the can, and in 2018, for example, they had an engineer who looked at the building and said, you need $9 million of repairs. Either they threw out the board or they voted against doing that assessment. And then in 2021, they brought back the same engineer who was now $15 million to do the repairs. And as the building was collapsing, there was a petition going around by the unit owners to rescind the assessment. And the assessments were staggering, like $250,000 per unit.
So, and and my last question on Surfside was, did it have something to do with it was on a soft surface? It was the building was that's what I've heard. It was a sandy
I,
surface or foundation versus something like New York City or Manhattan where it's on bedrock.
it, the issues that I've heard since the collapse were that I think I think the concerns that I heard were that the water had the salt had certainly beat up on the rebar that holds together the concrete and all that. What I've heard since the collapse is that NIST, while investigating and just had the foundation left, was constantly pumping water out because the water table had risen dramatically over the years, maybe because of climate change or for whatever reasons. But I think it was a combination of the water and that the water from the ocean, the salt, and the water that had the water table, which had increased at the building, which led to the issues that were to follow.
So we have one collapse and it results in, basically a poison pill for the entire condominium market. You guys find out about a blacklist. What do you do about it when you found out?
So, not being shy, we said,
Don't be
okay.
shy. You can say anything you want.
We say, well, let's try a Freedom of Information request, Freedom of Information Act request. And it was sort of like, okay, we'll send it to Fannie and Freddie. They're under conservatorship with FHFA. And they responded back, not unsurprisingly, saying we're not the government, we're not subject to the Freedom of Information Act. We then sent a Freedom of Information Act request to FHFA as conservator for Fannie Mae. FHFA responded back with something along the lines of, we're not aware of any list.
And did you eventually get the list?
We did.
How
Not
did you
from,
get it?
I can't say, but
Okay.
it wasn't from our FOIA request.
We don't want the Eastern District of Virginia investigating you, the DA.
No.
They seem to be on a roll there. All right, so how does a condominium find out they're on the blacklist? I mean, is it public information? Is there a way to find out? Because
So,
that's such an important thing. You're living in your home, and you might not be able to sell it with a compliant loan, with a marketable loan. How do I find that out? That's such critical information.
so that's a great question. So, but unfortunately, the blacklist or ineligible list um, uh, had a non-disclosure at the top of it that it was confidential under some NDA, so that only lenders were supposed to have a copy of it, or services for Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. Uh, so it seems like services for Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac and us somehow were the only people with the complete list now of 5,500 associations and CAI, and that I was active with. It was this is crazy. There should be some transparency so associations and unit owners know if they're on the list. And that took a couple of years to occur. And what Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, what Fannie Mae anyway did, is they put up on their portal something where you could look up an individual condominium. And if you have the taxpayer ID number and the address, and you're a board member or a property manager, you could find out if you're on the list. And then you could have an interactive process with somebody from Fannie Mae to discuss what does that mean and how do you get off of the list. But most people don't know that exists. And it's difficult to navigate because you can only do one association at a time and need the taxpayer ID number, etc. So most people found out because somebody would lose a sale. A
Which
sale fell through. Why did the sale fall through? Richard?
What objective criteria did they have to put someone on the list as opposed to just saying it's arbitrary? Like, there was a cutoff of a number or something,
Oh,
but what
oh,
were the
oh,
criteria?
Okay, so for example, on insurance, because they started looking not only at the Surfside issues, but also Surfside was probably possibly dramatically underinsured, though Great American paid the full amount of the policy limits plus another $30 million, I think about $67 million into court, I believe, to pay for the insurance side for the association property claims. But the biggest concern as to why people are on the list, on the list that the lenders see, and that we were seeing month to month, it would show the name of the condominium and why it's on the list: insurance, critical repairs. So if it weren't insured for 100% replacement cost, if it had more than a 5% deductible on the stated limits, that would disqualify it. Carriers have started insuring roofs of condominiums at actual cash value, which after 20 years is zero, so wouldn't pay, and Fannie Mae wouldn't accept that because they wouldn't pay anything for damage to the roofs because they had depreciated down to nothing. Um, and then critical repairs would have been the structural inspections and other inspections that may have come up either because the association was forward thinking and did it on their own, or in reaction to Surfside, they got the inspections. And those inspections would be the second biggest reason, being the critical repairs.
So can the association, I'll call it grieve the process or whatever, or challenge the process, or does it have to be the lender only?
No,
Uh,
no, no. The
how do you
association.
how do you cure this?
Okay, so the association, in theory, with the interactive process, is supposed to get some guidance from Fannie Mae in terms of how to cure it. For example, if you're not insured for 100% replacement cost, um, then the answer is simple, other than dollars. With the insurance market being what it's been like with increases in master policies, you cure it by getting the proper amounts of insurance
But
on issues such as
how do I, is there a way for me to like produce that certificate of insurance and get it to somebody at Fannie Mae who actually looks at it and says, okay, you're off the blacklist? I mean,
they sort of want you dealing with one of the services, or there are a few companies around that are sort of like authorized representatives on behalf of Fannie Mae, and they can help with the process of getting people off the list. But it's not as easy as saying, gee, we bought more insurance, we're off the list. We found that, at least up to this point, that a lender or servicer really needs to sort of go, or a company. I think there's one in New York City, and I think there's a few across the country that deal with Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, and with lenders, and decide whether associations can be approved or not approved, and also if they're on the list, how to get them off the list.
I mean, my experience, and again, it's mostly with co-ops, is especially with a smaller building, the lenders are going to say they're not on the list. We're just not going to lend there. It's not worth the work to get them in compliance. Because and again, I was just telling you before we came on, I had a situation where I had a large complex, so I did have juice with respect to the lenders because they did want to lend there, and we had to get a U.S. congressman involved and it was a mistake. They were on the list for an incorrect reason. And it was so difficult to communicate with them that we literally had to engage a congressman who set up a meeting with Fannie Mae representatives. And I went from never hearing from anybody to I had about 20 people on the Zoom meeting with me. And we did resolve it. And they were appreciative that we brought it to their attention. But, my experience has been
But
they don't.
that's after a congressional inquiry. And any request by a congressman to do anything is legally considered a congressional inquiry. It
So
shouldn't take
I
a,
had to bring a congressional inquiry for really. I'll tell you exactly what a one of the co-ops was foreclosed, so they had a representative on the property. It's a 2,000 unit co-op, and they were redoing the roofs, and they had like a nor'easter, and a couple of the on the new roof, a couple of the tiles fell to the ground. So we reported it to Fannie Mae, who said there's critical repairs that need to be made, and we said no, there's not. This is a brand, and by the way, we had just done tens of millions in improvements. And ironically, Fannie Mae was the lender on the underlying mortgage for the co-op. So
oh, interesting.
yeah. So it's like you paid the money, and we had to go back to the bank to show that we did like $30 million in work, and it worked out. But it took months, and we lost a lot of deals. A lot of people got hurt.
Yeah, and if Fannie Mae had been was the lender, they were already in on the risk for
Yeah,
tens of
but it's
millions of dollars, I assume.
yeah, there it was a $50 million. No, but it was apples and oranges. It might as well have
Yeah.
been in another country.
Yeah, no, 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 yeah. You're talking about a list. Are we, as the lender, all we care about is are you making your mortgage payments? But as the compliance people were saying, a few tiles blew off. It sounds like you have major critical repairs. It's difficult.
So, Stephen, we're coming up towards the end of our show here, and we really appreciate your time and your expertise. If there's anything to wrap this up, what advice would you give condominium associations with respect to dealing with Fannie Mae proactively or defensively? You know, uh,
Well, I don't think the takeaway should be don't do structural inspections, et cetera. I think the or reserve studies. I think all that for good governance are things that have to be done. CAI and other stakeholders, the mortgage bankers and others across the country are having meetings also under an NDA with Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, and FHFA, as I understand it. I'm not part of those discussions, but I think the top two items are all the rejections because of insurance and critical repairs, and trying to get some reasonable balance, not in terms of just ignoring serious problems that could lead to serious problems such as a collapse. But there is some balancing, and I'm told, without being told much, that the conversation's going in the right direction, that there's a change with the new director, Bill Pulte, as director, and we're hopeful that we'll keep chipping away at it. Some people by diplomacy, and us by the sword and the dagger, or however we have to fight it congressionally and all that. But I'm hopeful that these discussions that are taking place by the stakeholders will result in some positive changes, because 5,500, if you had 5,000 condominiums and each had modest 100 units each, you were talking about a 2,000 unit co-op. If they had 100 units each, that's a 500,000. The condominium units, if each one's owned by two people, that's 1 million people that are affected across the country. That's too many people who are sort of stuck in their homes, who most likely, prior to the Surfside collapse, got their loans bought by Fannie Mae or Freddie Mac. So, but they can't sell, and so it can't stay the way it is. So I'm
it's like the whole
hopeful that
the whole city of Boston could lose their homes, essentially.
exactly. As long as we don't lose the Red Sox or the
All right.
or the
Well,
Patriots.
okay. Well, I'm a Mets fan, so you only hated me in '86, but
Yeah,
so listen,
we're over it.
we're we're running out of time here. This was
Okay.
a really great conversation. I'd like to continue it offline because with respect to your ongoing efforts, because again,
Yeah,
I'd like to tie in some of the New York people with you.
yeah, that would be great.
We are knowledgeable, and this is a very serious issue here. So I want to thank you for your time, and you are now officially a co-op and condo insider. So congratulations on that.
Thank
And
you, thank you for
and
having me. And
And we really appreciate your time, Stephen. And that's it for the show. We hope you enjoyed listening, and subscribe and listen to this podcast and many podcasts to come in the future. Thank you for listening.
Thanks for listening to the Co-op and Condo Insider. We hope you found today's conversation informative and insightful. Don't forget to subscribe. We're available on all major podcast platforms. Until next time, stay informed.